This is John W. Whitehead, author of Battlefield America, The War on the American People, bringing you a message about the state of our nation. If there's one thing the modern government that we live in today fears, it's speech, what we would call free speech. In fact, the American government, the government we have today, the federal government, is so paranoid about speech that they have categories of speech that they see as evil. For example, you have hate speech, intolerant speech, conspiratorial speech, threatening speech, incendiary speech, inflammatory speech, radical speech, extremist speech. Well, stop a minute and think about this. We have a First Amendment. It's called in our Bill of Rights. The First Amendment guarantees free speech. It even guarantees the right to stand on a street corner and peacefully protest against your government and say, this is what I don't like. Point your finger, whatever you want to do. So why would the government be so freaked out about speech? Well, one thing is how you control a populace, how you control citizens, is you control what they say. That's why we have a First Amendment. That's why the Founding Fathers, as we call them, who wrote our Constitution, Bill of Rights, gave us that right. They knew if you had a right to stand on the street corner and tell the government to go to hell or whatever you want to do, as long as it was peaceful, you had a right to do it. That's how you change government. Well, that's the point. They don't want people to think. And how do you control how people think? Radically, if you want to use that word, you control what they say. People stop thinking, they stop debating, and that's what happened. That's why the government's going to great lengths to categorize certain forms of speech and actually go after them. That's why you see Facebook, Google, all the big corporations now talking about they're going to censor hate speech, incendiary speech, or speech they don't like. What they're doing is they're controlling how you think. And here's the point. The big corporate entities like Facebook, etc. down the line, Google, they work with the NSA, they work with all the big corporations. Amazon built the intelligence cloud for all the intelligence agencies and cooperates with them effectively. So you're dealing with something that we've seen in former regimes in the past. In my opinion, what we're moving into is a fascistic regime that, first of all, is going to control speech and it's going to control everything else. And then once people get fed up with it and say, I've had enough, and they grab a gun or something like that and say, we're going to rebel, they say, oh, look, you're getting violent. But the violence starts, the initial violence starts against speech. The government has amazing powers today under the National Defense Authorization Act. If you're labeled an extremist, by the way, under the Obama administration in 2009, they did two memos, right-wing extremism and left-wing extremism. When I read those two memos, I came to the conclusion that an extremist, which is a terrorist, by the way, those words extremist and terrorism are used interchangeably in sentences. A terrorist was anybody who opposed government, not violently, just opposed government. People who wrote our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, understood this. And again, this is why the British Empire, which hated them, by the way, hated them, labeled them as threats and did not want them to speak, but they spoke out. They said, we're not cowards, we're going to speak out. Today, if you were to quote Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, Benjamin Franklin, a lot of the fellows who worked on our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and fomented revolution, if you didn't use their name and stood on the street corner, you'd probably get arrested. And that does happen. We've had cases here at the Rutherford Institute where people speak out on social media and they have the FBI at their door next day and some have been arrested. Let's let the Founding Fathers speak for themselves. Listen to their words. Under today's categories of speech, extremism, and terrorism, would they be considered domestic terrorists? Let me give you a few quotes. Thomas Jefferson declared, "What country can preserve its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms." He also concluded, Jefferson said, the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Benjamin Franklin said, "Democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. Liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote." Thomas Paine, the great rebel, said, "It's the duty of the patriot to protect his country from the government." And who could forget Patrick Henry, who said, "Give me liberty or give me death." He was actually, and a number of the Founding Fathers early on were against the Constitution as written. They demanded a Bill of Rights, and they finally got it. But how did they get that Bill of Rights? They stood up and said, we ain't taking this. We're going to speak out, and we're going to defend our country. And this is after the Revolution. We're going to make sure that we have rights against a government which can turn into a beast, which we're seeing today. So what we have today is a government has no qualms about restricting speech, And again, this is like former regimes. If you look back to Nazi Germany, the first thing that the Nazis did and how they took control of the people, they controlled speech. People who spoke out against the government were labeled asocials. Today it's you're politically incorrect, but they were asocials. Well, guess where these asocials eventually wound up? In concentration camps. Once the people started going, yeah, that's not a good idea, speaking out like that and saying bad things about our government, and the general populace agreed, they start rounding up the people who were the rebels. And the next day in camp, they took away their arms, and they all were led into concentration camps. The question is today, do we want to end up like that? Are we going to think? Are we going to allow the government to control what we think? Are we going to continue to speak out? Are we going to negotiate the Constitution and say, well, I'd rather go to the mall, go shopping, watch TV, relax, the radicals out there? Or are we going to stand with those radicals who have a right to speak? Do we really believe in freedom? Do we really believe in our Constitution? If you really believe in the Constitution, you're going to take a stand with people you don't agree with. People like the Founding Fathers, who today I believe would be labeled domestic terrorists. And there's a whole line of quotes. You should go to our website at rutherford.org, and you'll see there clearly in our Constitution section exactly what these people believe. They were radicals, and they changed the face of this country and gave us freedom. So the only therapy, in my opinion, the only therapy for this illness is truth. And we have to face the fact today that what we used to call rights have been reduced to mere privileges. Let me quote the great satirist George Carlin. Rights aren't rights if someone can take them away. They're privileges. That's all we've ever had in this country is a bill of temporary privileges. And if you read the news even badly, you know that every year the list gets shorter and shorter. The government doesn't care about you or your children or your rights or your welfare or your safety. It's interested in its own power. That's the only thing, keeping it and expanding it whenever possible. Most Americans do not know what's in the Constitution. They don't study it, and the polls show that. They can't even tell you who their local senators are. But here's the key. The three most beautiful words in the English language, if you believe in freedom, is we the people. That's how the Constitution starts. What does that mean? We the people are the government. The president's not the government. Your senator's not the government. The local city council's not the government. You're the government. We've allowed someone else to become the government. So folks, what I'm saying is here, don't let them label us or our founding fathers domestic terrorists. Let's take a stand right now, a peaceful stand, and fight back. Get involved in your local communities and start taking your freedoms back. For more information about the Rutherford Institute, visit us at www.rutherford.org.